Well, tonight we're going to be talking about the plagues of Egypt. When Moses was called to go back and talk to Pharaoh, and we go through the series of plagues, we're going to talk about the first 9 of them tonight. Next week we'll talk about the 10th one, but this is going to be the first 9. And the thing that people talk about many times, and we even had people last week who were discussing it, that the plagues of Egypt were directed at the gods of Egypt. And so they say, you know, if you look at this plague, you can pinpoint it back, and it's an attack on this god of Egypt. And if you look at this plague, you pinpoint it back, it's an attack of this god of Egypt. And to an extent it is, but that's really a very broad stroke that really can't be substantiated. And here's why I say that. Because Egypt has over 2,000 known gods that were in existence at that time. I mean, by their minds. Yeah, so we'd have 2,000 plagues to go through if he targeted every god. Now, some of these were like city gods, and some of them were regional gods, and some of them were national gods, and whatever else. But there are over 2,000 that have been identified from ancient Egypt. So all the plagues did not attack all of the gods specifically. But to prove that, I thought I'd go ahead and read a list of all 2,000 gods. No, we're not doing that either. But it really is a situation where, yes, there were absolutely certain gods, and some of the more primary ones that probably were definitely affected in the minds of the Egyptians when these plagues took place. But I don't think that the overall reason that God did these specific plagues was just to target a certain god. I think it was to show total control over all aspects of Egyptian life. The Nile was very important to the Egyptian people. It was the source of their life. If the Nile did not flow, they did not have anything. They're in the desert. The Nile is the source of life for them. And so when the different areas were targeted between crops and livestock and water and all that kind of stuff, I think God was really showing the completeness of his power over every aspect of Egyptian life. Now, in the presentation tonight, as we go through this, as we talk about each of the 9 plagues, I will list 1, 2, or 3 gods of Egypt that fit into that category of who would have been probably the primary ones at that time that they would have prayed to stop this, and the gods were unable to. But like I said, we're not going to break it down so that all 2,000 are mentioned or tell you what all they did. But basically, there was a god for every aspect of their life. Everything they did, every minute of the day, pretty much, they would attribute it to some kind of a god or deity that was in control of that. So talk about superstition. That's kind of the way they lived their whole life. So tonight we're going to be starting in Exodus really 5. We've done 1 through 4, and we're going to do chapters 5 through 10. Now, with that being said, we're going to skip some parts in there and some information in there so we can try to get through this. But we're going to kind of do the lead up going into this. So starting in Exodus 5, it says, "Then the Lord said to Moses, 'See, I have made you like God to Pharaoh, and your brother Aaron will be your prophet. You are to say everything I command you, and your brother Aaron is to tell Pharaoh to let the Israelites go out of his country. But I will harden Pharaoh's heart, and though I multiply my signs and wonders in Egypt, he will not listen to you. Then I will lay my hand on Egypt, and with mighty acts of judgment I will bring out my divisions, my people, the Israelites. And the Egyptians will know that I am the Lord when I stretch out my hand against Egypt and bring the Israelites out of it.'" So again, God's primary purpose is, he said, I am going to show that I am God. I don't care what God they pray to. I don't care what God they react to this with, because different people were probably praying to different gods in different areas. And God's not saying, I'm going to attack the gods of Egypt. He's saying, I am going to prove to Egypt that there's only one God, and I'm it. So that's his primary goal in this. Moses and Aaron did just as the Lord commanded them. Moses was 80 years old and Aaron 83 when they spoke to Pharaoh. The Lord said to Moses and Aaron, "When Pharaoh says to you, 'Perform a miracle,' then say to Aaron, 'Take your staff and throw it down before Pharaoh, and it will become a snake.'" So Moses and Aaron went to Pharaoh and did just as the Lord commanded. Aaron threw his staff down in front of Pharaoh and his officials, and it became a snake. Pharaoh then summoned wise men and sorcerers, and the Egyptian magicians also did the same things by their secret arts. Each one threw down his staff, and it became a snake. But Aaron's staff swallowed up their staffs. Yet Pharaoh's heart became hard, and he would not listen to them, just as the Lord had said. So what we're going to see in these first things that happen is God does some miracles, some judgments on Egypt. First little sign, throw the snake down. So Pharaoh goes, "Oh, okay. Well, here's my court magicians and all this kind of stuff." They come in, they throw their staffs down, they become snakes. The snake that Aaron threw down, or the staff that Aaron threw down, ate up their snake. So it shows that the power of God is greater than the power of the magicians there, but yet they were able to duplicate some of these first things. And that's what we're going to see in the first couple of plagues even. When Moses and Aaron do them, the magicians and the wise men of Pharaoh can do something like them. Now, they can't stop them, but they can do something like them. And so it makes Pharaoh even more hard to what Moses is doing. Now, like I said, if their magicians and their gods were really anything of any kind of significance, they would have stopped what God was doing. They couldn't. They could just kind of mimic what was happening, but it was still up to God when it actually ended and when things went away. So we're going to see that, though, in these first couple things. It says, "Then the Lord said to Moses, 'Pharaoh's heart is unyielding. He refuses to let the people go. Go to Pharaoh in the morning as he goes out to the river. Confront him on the bank of the Nile, and take in your hand the staff that was changed into a snake. Then say to him, "The Lord, the God of the Hebrews, has sent me to say to you, let my people go, so that they may worship me in the wilderness. But until now, you have not listened. This is what the Lord says, by this you will know that I am the Lord. With the staff that is in my hand, I will strike the water of the Nile, and it will be changed into blood. The fish in the Nile will die, and the river will stink. The Egyptians will not be able to drink its water." The Lord said to Moses, "Tell Aaron, take your staff and stretch out your hand over the waters of Egypt, over the streams and canals, over the ponds and all the reservoirs, and they will turn to blood. Blood will be everywhere in Egypt, even in vessels of wood and stone." So there have been historians, scientists, archaeologists, whatever, that have tried to explain some of these plagues. The first one, they said, okay, he turns the Nile into blood. So that what they say is, well, that's just kind of a little bit of an exaggeration. It wasn't actually blood. It was just the water turned red. And this can happen when clay cliffs down in Ethiopia crumble off and the red clay falls into the river and it turns the Nile red as it goes by. And that's probably what happened. And they just think that Moses was really good about timing this thing, I guess. But here it turned red. But here's the thing you have to remember. We have to look at the whole story. And when his magicians here in just a second reproduce this, they're reproducing it on a small local level. If all it was that the Nile going by turned red, you could say, yeah, I can see where that can be explained. But when it's every stream, lake, reservoir, vessel of water, wood, stone, whatever, all turned to blood, that's pretty impressive. How that mud from Ethiopia got into all those vessels at the same time, that's pretty impressive. So the other thing is that we have to look at is how it was written originally. And in the Hebrew, the word that is used there for blood is not a word that is used for color. It is used for blood. If he meant that it was red like blood, he would have said it was red like blood. But the word he used is always used for blood coming out of a vein or an artery, whatever. If, with the exception, the only other time in Hebrew that this word is used as kind of a euphemism for blood is when it's talked about the blood of the grape. When they squish it. The wine that comes out, basically. Otherwise, that's what this word is used for. So he turns the water to blood. And then it says, Moses and Aaron did just as the Lord had commanded, and he raised his staff in the presence of Pharaoh and his officials and struck the water of the Nile. And all the water was changed into blood. The fish in the Nile died, and the river smelled so bad that the Egyptians could not drink its water. Blood was everywhere in Egypt. But the Egyptian magicians did the same things by their secret arts. And Pharaoh's heart became hard. He would not listen to Moses and Aaron, just as the Lord had said. So we don't know exactly what his magicians did. The other thing we have to take into consideration is they may have been able to do some things that we cannot explain by just a sleight of hand or a trick. There may have been demonic influence in this as well because they were praying to all these multiple gods and whatever else. But this is one of them that they were able to somehow reproduce in some fashion. Whether it be just one vessel of water they poured out and said, oh, see here, we can make this blood as well, or whether they did some localized trick or whatever it was enough that Pharaoh goes, okay, it can be explained, no big deal. His heart was hardened, and he said, I'm not going to listen to these guys. Well, yeah, they might have had a pitcher of water and said, remember, this was pitcher. Oh, look, it's blood too. Yeah, who knows? It says, instead, he turned and went into his palace and did not take even this to heart. And all the Egyptians dug along the Nile to get drinking water, because they could not drink the water of the river. 7 days passed after the Lord struck the Nile. Okay, so here are some of those gods that we were talking about. Khnum was the guardian of the river source. Hapi was the spirit of the Nile. And Osiris was, the Nile was Osiris's bloodstream, is what they considered it. It was the lifeblood of the country, even though it was, of course, water. But Moses literally turned it into blood, which made it really gross. So, but these are gods that were affected with it. The thing is, it was duplicated by the Egyptians somehow. And again, we don't have the exact means of what they did it. We don't know exactly how they did it. But they were able to duplicate this miracle to the point where it satisfied Pharaoh. The miracle occurs in the land of Goshen, where the Israelites lived. It was up in the delta area because the Pharaoh's palace was kind of up there where it was still more lush and stuff. And so it was up in that area where they lived. And there was dead fish everywhere and a really nasty, putrid smell, which you could imagine with the Nile turning to blood and then all the dead fish and animals and stuff, it would have been really nasty. And we're going to see the aftermath of some of these plagues is probably about as bad as the plague itself. It says, then the Lord said to Moses, go to Pharaoh and say to him, this is what the Lord says. Let my people go so that they may worship me. If you refuse to let them go, I will send a plague of frogs on your whole country. The Nile will teem with frogs. They will come up into your palace, into your bedroom, and onto your bed, onto the houses of your officials and on your people, and into your ovens and kneading troughs. The frogs will come upon you and your people and all your officials. Then the Lord said to Moses, tell Aaron, stretch out your hand with your staff over the streams and canals and ponds, and make frogs come up on the land of Egypt. So Aaron stretched out his hand over the waters of Egypt, and the frogs came up and covered the land. But the magicians did the same thing by their secret arts. Now again, what they did, how they did it, whether they stuck some frogs up their sleeves and went, oh, see, nothing, oh, woo, look, frogs. How they did it, we don't know. But they did something that convinced Pharaoh that it was not a miraculous sign that could only come from the one true God. They also made frogs come up on the land of Egypt. Pharaoh summoned Moses and Aaron and said, "Pray to the Lord to take the frogs away from me and my people, and I will let your people go to offer sacrifices to the Lord." Now, again, here's an interesting thing. The magicians of Pharaoh were able to bring frogs up on the land, but they couldn't get them to go away. Well, God already brought them up on the land. That's the small part of the trick. Then he goes to Moses and Aaron and says, now what are we going to do? Our land is covered with frogs. And obviously his magicians, obviously all the people and all the resources he had could not end this plague. So he goes back to Moses and Aaron and says, you know what, if you pray to your God and get rid of these things, I'll let you go. Because we're bound here. Even though my guys could duplicate it, they can't make it go away. Moses said to Pharaoh, I leave you to the honor of setting the time for me to pray for you and your officials and your people, that you and your houses may be rid of the frogs, except for those that remain in the Nile. He says, okay, I'll let you choose the time. I want you to know that this is not just a trick. You tell me when you want them to leave, and I'll pray and they'll go. It says, tomorrow, Pharaoh said. Moses replied, it will be as you say, so that you may know that there is no one like the Lord our God. The frogs will leave you and your houses, your officials, and your people. They will remain only in the Nile. After Moses and Aaron left Pharaoh, Moses cried out to the Lord about the frogs that he had brought on Pharaoh. And the Lord did what Moses asked. The frogs died in the houses and in the courtyards and in the fields. So it's really nasty to think of all these frogs coming into your home and into your room and on your bed and your kneading troughs and your ovens and everything else, but then they all die. And now you have dead frogs in your house, in your bed, in your kneading troughs, in your ovens, in your courtyards and everything else. So they had to get rid of them. So it says, they were piled into heaps and the land reeked of them. So what gods were affected here? Hapi and Hekwit, okay, frog goddesses of Egypt, both related to fertility. So God says, oh, you like to worship frogs? I'll give you frogs. And here come the frogs. But these gods could do nothing. Again, it was duplicated by the Egyptians somehow. It occurs in the Goshen area where the Israelites lived. So we move on to the next one. Then the Lord said to Moses, tell Aaron, stretch out your staff and strike the dust of the ground. And throughout the land of Egypt, the dust will become gnats. They did this, and when Aaron stretched out his hand with the staff and struck the dust of the ground, gnats came on the people and animals. All the dust throughout the land of Egypt became gnats. But when the magicians tried to produce gnats by their secret arts, they could not. Here's a turning point. God says, oh yeah, try this one. And they couldn't. They had no answer. Now, if you're reading from a version other than like the New American Standard, the NIV, the ESV, something like that, you might have lice. That lice came out of the ground and did that. And there's some speculation, and all the way back throughout written history and traditions of Scripture and the Bible and everything else, even back into ancient rabbinical writings and things like that, there's been kind of this debate about exactly what it was. So some of them say they were flying insects, which would kind of eliminate the lice. But they were infesting and biting and all this kind of stuff, which kind of limits the gnats just a little bit. So they chose gnats, but the word that is actually used here, ken, in Hebrew, if you look it up in Strong's Concordance, because I know you guys all do that when you go home at night, sit there and thumb through the concordance, there is no definitive answer of what it is. It's a Hebrew word that we just really don't know how to translate it. So some people have tried to say it's been anything from mosquitoes to maggots to little biting midges, anything. And they said, but we don't know for sure what it was. What we know is when they struck the ground, the dust became these flying, biting, swarming, nasty insects. And when Pharaoh's magicians tried to do something similar, they had no answer for it. And so they were all getting eaten and annoyed and bugged by these things that came out. And it says, since the gnats were on people and animals everywhere, the magicians said to Pharaoh, this is the finger of God. The Egyptian magicians went, we got nothing. I don't even know how Moses did this. This has to truly be the finger of God. This is something that is supernatural. It says, but Pharaoh's heart was hard, and he would not listen, just as the Lord had said. Seb is the earth god of Egypt. And so he would be in control of the earth, the dust, all those kind of things, even the insects. And obviously, the Egyptian god Seb had no answer for this. It was not duplicated by the Egyptians. It still occurs in the area of Goshen where the Israelites lived, and it's attributed by the Egyptians as the true finger of God. So again, we're seeing this turning point. Now all of a sudden, the Egyptians have no answer for reproducing anything even close to it. And they're even telling Pharaoh, okay, we're out of our league here. This is the real deal. This is the finger of God. We need to kind of back off here. It says, then the Lord said to Moses, get up early in the morning and confront Pharaoh as he goes to the river and say to him, this is what the Lord says, let my people go so that they may worship me. If you do not let my people go, I will send swarms of flies on you and your officials, on your people and into your houses. The houses of the Egyptians will be full of flies. Even the ground will be covered with them. But on that day I will deal differently with the land of Goshen where my people live. No swarms of flies will be there, so that you will know that I, the Lord, am in this land. I will make a distinction between my people and your people. This sign will occur tomorrow. So another escalation, another turning point. God says, okay, when I made the Nile turn into blood, the whole Nile turned into blood. All the troughs, all the bowls, all the dishes, all the rivers, all the ponds, all the reservoirs, whatever, all became blood, and included all of Egypt. When they had the other things of the gnats and things like that, it affected all of Egypt. The frogs came out of all of the Nile. And now all of a sudden, Moses says, God's making this distinction. You guys are going to be covered in flies. But we live right over here, and there's not going to be a fly in any of our houses. Nothing. Now, that sets this apart from the other miracles or the other plagues that come, because he says, I'm going to differentiate between anybody who's an Israelite and an Egyptian. And flies are not going to swarm around the Israelites. You're not going to have no problems, but the Egyptians are, even though they're really intermingled here. It says, and the Lord did this. Dense swarms of flies poured into Pharaoh's palace and into the houses of his officials throughout Egypt, and the land was ruined by the flies. Then Pharaoh summoned Moses and Aaron and said, go sacrifice to your God here in the land. But Moses said, that would not be right. The sacrifices we offer the Lord our God would be detestable to the Egyptians, and if we offer sacrifices that are detestable in their eyes, will they not stone us? He says, we got to offer sacrifices. We got to kill animals and offer them on an altar to our God, and your people are going to see that as something pagan, and they're going to want to put us to death. We can't do it here in Egypt. We got to take a little trip. It says, we must take a 3-day journey into the wilderness to offer sacrifices to the Lord our God, as he commands us. Pharaoh said, I will let you go to offer sacrifices to the Lord your God in the wilderness, but you must not go very far. Now pray for me. Get these flies out of here. Moses answered, as soon as I leave you, I will pray to the Lord, and tomorrow the flies will leave Pharaoh and his officials and his people. Only let Pharaoh be sure that he does not act, excuse me, got a little tickle, act deceitfully again by not letting the people go to offer sacrifices to the Lord. Then Moses left Pharaoh and prayed to the Lord, and the Lord did what Moses asked. The flies left Pharaoh and his officials and his people. Not a fly remained. But this time also, Pharaoh hardened his heart and would not let the people go. So, Egyptian name that looks like it needs a couple more vowels. Uetchit, the fly god of Egypt, would be the natural target of this. Because, like I said, 2,000 gods, they got a god for everything. They actually had a fly god. And so he said, here it is, it's Uetchit, and there you go, he's a fly god. And obviously he was kind of targeted in this. But the thing that's different is God makes a separation between the Egyptians and the Israelites. And this is where everything starts to divide. Each time a plague comes, it escalates a little bit more. It gets a little bit more intense, it gets a little bit harder, and it starts to become more direct towards the people of Egypt and on more things that deal with them. So it says at this point, no more plagues will come upon the Israelites. So from this point on, they're fine. They're living it up. Now, the rest of Egypt is getting hammered. But in the land of Goshen, life's good. They're sitting back. It says, then the Lord said to Moses, go to Pharaoh and say to him, this is what the Lord, the God of the Hebrews, says. Let my people go so that they may worship me. If you refuse to let them go and continue to hold them back, the hand of the Lord will bring a terrible plague on your livestock in the field, on your horses, donkeys, and camels, and on your cattle, sheep, and goats. But the Lord will make a distinction between the livestock of Israel and that of Egypt, so that no animal belonging to the Israelites will die. The Lord set a time and said, tomorrow the Lord will do this in the land. The next day the Lord did it, and all the livestock of the Egyptians died, but not one animal belonging to the Israelites died. So to try to explain this away as some kind of a plague on animals that came in, some kind of a virus, some kind of a disease that came in and hit them, does not make any sense. Because you could have two cows standing side by side, one owned by an Israelite and one owned by an Egyptian. The one owned by the Egyptian dropped dead. The one of the Israelite stood there looking around like, I guess I get more food. But only the livestock of the Egyptians died. It says, Pharaoh investigated and found that not even one of the animals of the Israelites had died. Yet his heart was unyielding, and he would not let the people go. Ptah, Menevis, Hather, Ammon, all Egyptian gods associated with bulls and cows and livestock, all gods that could have potentially been the target of this, or more likely, all of them were. Because again, God is not specifically targeting gods. God is targeting areas of their life to show that he is the God over all of this. So no matter how many of the gods of the Egyptians you want to pull out and try to put against him, he proves that they are not gods at all. They're just fictional characters against the one true God. So they could stack all 2,000 up on a list here, and they're still not gods, and they were still unable to answer anything that the one true God did. It affected property, and it was the death of the livestock, and again, only the property and the livestock of the Egyptians. Then the Lord said to Moses and Aaron, take handfuls of soot from a furnace and have Moses toss it into the air in the presence of Pharaoh. It will become fine dust over the whole land of Egypt, and festering boils will break out on people and animals throughout the land. So they took soot from a furnace and stood before Pharaoh. Moses tossed it in the air, and festering boils broke out on people and animals. The magicians could not stand before Moses because of the boils that were on them and on all the Egyptians. So not only could the magicians not reproduce it, they couldn't even come stand before him to try because they were so infected with these boils. And it says, but the Lord hardened Pharaoh's heart. He would not listen to Moses and Aaron, just as the Lord had said to Moses. So the boils came in. Sekhmet, the Egyptian goddess of epidemics, Serapis, the Egyptian goddess of healing, and Imhotep, the Egyptian goddess of healing, all, again, unable to have an answer for what God brought against them in the plague. It affected all the physical bodies of the people. So you're seeing different aspects of their life attacked. Now they've had all their physical properties taken care of. Now it's their physical bodies, their own selves are being attacked. Pharaoh's magicians could not even appear in the court because they too were affected and had no answer for what had happened. Then the Lord said to Moses, "Get up early in the morning, confront Pharaoh, and say to him, 'This is what the Lord, the God of the Hebrews, says, Let my people go so that they may worship me. Or this time I will send the full force of my plagues against you and against your officials and your people, so that you may know that there is no one like me in all the earth. For by now I could have stretched out my hand and struck you and your people with a plague that would have wiped you off the earth.'" So Moses is relaying this message from God saying, you know I'm playing with you, because at any time I could just say, enough, and you're gone. I can wipe you from the face of the earth if I want to. It says, "But I have raised you up for this very purpose, that I might show you my power and that my name might be proclaimed in all the earth. You still set yourself against my people and will not let them go. Therefore, at this time tomorrow, I will send the worst hailstorm that has ever fallen on Egypt, from the day it was founded until now. Give an order now to bring your livestock and everything that you have in the field to a place of shelter, because the hail will fall on every person and animal that has not been brought in and is still out in the field, and they will die." Those officials of Pharaoh who feared the word of the Lord hurried to bring in their slaves and their livestock inside. But those who ignored the word of the Lord left their slaves and livestock in the field. Then the Lord said to Moses, "Stretch out your hand towards the sky, so that hail will fall all over Egypt, on the people and animals and on everything growing in the fields of Egypt." When Moses stretched out his staff towards the sky, the Lord sent thunder and hail, and lightning flashed down to the ground. So the Lord rained hail on the land of Egypt. Hail fell and lightning flashed back and forth. It was the worst storm in all the land of Egypt since it had become a nation. Throughout Egypt, hail struck everything in the fields, both people and animals. It beat down everything growing in the fields and stripped every tree. The only place it did not hail was in the land of Goshen, where the Israelites were. Again, Pharaoh looks out. Everything's getting wiped out over here. But look, blue skies. No thunder, no rain, no hail, no nothing. They're fine. And here we are getting wiped out. Then Pharaoh summoned Moses and Aaron. "This time I have sinned," he said to them. "The Lord is in the right, and I and my people are in the wrong. Pray to the Lord, for we have had enough thunder and hail. I will let you go. You don't have to stay any longer." Moses replied, "When I have gone out of the city, I will spread out my hands and in prayer to the Lord. The thunder will stop, and there will be no more hail, so that you may know that the earth is the Lord's. But I know that you and your officials still do not fear the Lord God." The flax and barley were destroyed, since the barley had headed and the flax was in bloom. The wheat and the spelt, however, were not destroyed because they ripened later. So it took out most of their crops, their early season crops, but they still had their late crops that hadn't grown up and bloomed yet, so the hail didn't take those all out. So then Moses left Pharaoh and went out of the city. He spread out his hand toward the Lord, and the thunder and the hail stopped, and the rain no longer poured down on the land. When Pharaoh saw that the rain and hail and thunder had stopped, he sinned again, and he and his officials hardened their hearts. So now Pharaoh's at the point where when he's being afflicted, he's repentant, but as soon as it stops, maybe it wasn't God after all. Maybe I can do what I want to do. How do I know God stopped the hail? Maybe it was just a natural occurring thing. So he's debating with God. He's trying to negotiate a little bit. And it said, "So Pharaoh's heart was hard, and he would not let the Israelites go, just as the Lord had said through Moses." So in hail, we have Nut, the Egyptian sky goddess, Isis and Seth, the Egyptian agricultural deities, and Shu, the Egyptian god of the atmosphere. Again, all of them powerless against what God did with a hailstorm that is unprecedented in Egypt. Now, again, you have to remember, Egypt is really in the Sahara Desert. You get just a few miles off the Nile, and it is nothing but sand dunes. And here they're getting torrential rains and hails. And it's not a common thing there at all. So it says, a historical uniqueness for such a storm in Egypt. And Pharaoh confessed his sin, but later changed his mind. So in the next one, then it says, then the Lord said to Moses, go to Pharaoh, for I have hardened his heart and the hearts of his officials, so that I may perform these signs of mine among them, that you may tell your children and grandchildren how I dealt harshly with the Egyptians. And when you go to the book of Deuteronomy, and he's talking about tell these stories to your family, to the next generations, to your children and your children's children, God is saying, I'm doing all this so you're going to have a great story to tell later. I'm doing it so that the Egyptians will see there's only one God, and I am him. And so that the Israelites will see there's only one true God, which lasted until they got into the wilderness and built a golden calf. But he was showing them, I am the only one true God that there is. And he says, and these signs and wonders are going to be something you will tell generations to come. How great God was in defeating the Egyptians and bringing you out of their hand. And it says, and how I performed my signs among them, and that you may know that I am the Lord. So Moses and Aaron went to Pharaoh and said to him, this is what the Lord, the God of the Hebrews, says. How long will you refuse to humble yourself before me? Let my people go so that they may worship me. If you refuse to let them go, I will bring locusts onto your country tomorrow. They will cover the face of the ground so that it cannot be seen. They will devour what little you have left after the hail, including every tree that is growing in your fields. They will fill your houses and those of all your officials and all the Egyptians. Something neither your parents nor your ancestors have ever seen from the day they settled in this land until now. Then Moses turned and left Pharaoh. Pharaoh's officials said to him, how long will this man be a snare to us? Let the people go so that they may worship the Lord their God. Now even Pharaoh's officials are going, we can't take it anymore. Not only can we not duplicate the stuff they're doing, we have no answer for what they're doing, and we are getting beat up here. So you have got to do something here, Pharaoh. They said, do you not yet realize that Egypt is ruined? Then Moses and Aaron were brought back to Pharaoh. Go worship the Lord your God, he said, but tell me who will be going. Moses answered, we will go with our young and with our old, with our sons and our daughters, and with our flocks and herds, because we are to celebrate a festival to the Lord. Pharaoh said, the Lord be with you if I let you go. Along with your women and children, clearly you are bent on evil. No, have only the men go and worship the Lord, since that's what you have been asking for. Then Moses and Aaron were driven out of Pharaoh's presence. So now Pharaoh's trying to strike a deal. I'll let you guys go, take the men, take a few animals, go do your sacrifice, and come on back. But I'm going to keep your wife and your children here and the rest of your flock so that I know you're coming back. So I'm not really doing what you're asking, but I'm willing to compromise a little bit. Let's come to common ground. And I think this is something that still people do today. When they come before God, hey, God, I know you said this, but let's come to some terms here. Let's negotiate. Sit down and we'll talk about a reasonable solution. And God's like, I've already got the solution, and it doesn't change. There is no negotiation. There is no coming to terms. God said, this is what I want, and that's the way he still is today. God is not out there to listen to our reason. God is God, and he's the only God, and he has the one true answer. And so it says, and then the Lord said to Moses, stretch out your hand over Egypt so that locusts swarm over the land and devour everything growing in the fields, everything left by the hail. So Moses stretched out his staff over Egypt, and the Lord made an east wind blow across the land. All that day and all that night. By morning, the wind had brought the locusts. They invaded all Egypt and settled down in every area of the country in great numbers. Never before had there been such a plague of locusts, nor will there ever be again. They covered all the ground until it was black. They devoured all that was left after the hail, everything growing in the fields and the fruit on the trees. Nothing green remained on tree or plant in all the land of Egypt. Pharaoh quickly summoned Moses and Aaron and said, I have sinned against the Lord your God and against you. Now forgive my sin once more and pray to the Lord your God to take this deadly plague away from me. Moses then left Pharaoh and prayed to the Lord. And the Lord changed the wind to a very strong west wind, which caught up the locusts and carried them into the Red Sea. Not a locust was left anywhere in Egypt. So, again, another plague, a few more gods of Egypt fall, and it devastated everything that was left from the hail. The crops that hadn't yet come up yet, locusts don't care. They're going to find the little nubs and eat the little green tops off them. They don't care if it's ripened or not. They came in and just devastated everything. It says, but the Lord hardened Pharaoh's heart, and he would not let the Israelites go. So Locus Serapia was the Egyptian deity, the protector from locusts. They had locusts in the area, and they had a god specifically that would keep them safe from the locusts that would come through at different times of the year. And obviously, that god was napping that day because it didn't help. The locust Pharaoh offers a compromise. He doesn't offer to surrender. He offers a compromise, which is really nothing at all. The compromise is rejected, and Pharaoh again confessed his sin. And then in this next part it says, then Pharaoh said to Moses, stretch out your hand towards the sky so that darkness spreads over Egypt, darkness that can be felt. So Moses stretched out his hand towards the sky, and total darkness covered all Egypt for 3 days. And that term, darkness that can be felt, if you've ever been someplace that is so dark that it just feels like it's enveloping you, that's what we're talking about. Not dark like, oh, look, it's cloudy outside, or oh, it's a little bit dusk outside, or anything like that. We're talking black. And it says, no one could see anyone else or move about for 3 days. Yet all the Israelites had light in the places where they lived. So how's that for a weird miracle? Egypt is dark, except for the land of Goshen where the Israelites are living, and they can see. They've got light. But the light doesn't even penetrate over into Egypt. It's a line. It's like, we can see, you got nothing. And he just struck them all into darkness. Now, for darkness, there's a number of gods that play into this because the sun represents basically light and life. And so you have this cycle where basically the sun comes up and lives during the day, and then you go into the realm of the darkness at night and all this kind of stuff. So for darkness, you have different gods. You have Ra, you have Amun-Ra, you have Aten, Atum, Horus, and Thoth. They are all Egyptian gods of either the sun or the moon. The first, 5 there are sun gods in particular. And they are there, and they worship them because each day the sun comes up at some level, and they know that they're there, and they know their prayers are answered because, look, there's light again, so that means they like us. That's a pretty safe God to worship most of the time. Because even if it's cloudy, they're still there. It's still light. It's just not as bright as normal, but all of a sudden it's darkness. Not just cloudy, not just a little hazy, it's total darkness. And these gods are completely defeated. And for 3 days, not even the moon. It's just as dark at night, just as dark in the day. It is a darkness that can be felt. It is a darkness they cannot overcome. And so they are stuck there, and these gods are doing nothing. It is dark in Egyptian at midday. Apparently light was still provided for the Israelites in Goshen. How God did that, I don't know, but they could still see just fine. It says, then Pharaoh summoned Moses and said, go worship the Lord. Even your women and children may go with you. Only leave your flocks and herds behind. So take the women and children, but you can't take your animals. But Moses said, you must allow us to have sacrifices and burnt offerings to present to the Lord our God. Our livestock too must go with us. Not a hoof is to be left behind, for we have to use some of them in worshiping the Lord our God. And until we get there, we will not know what we are to use to worship the Lord. But the Lord hardened Pharaoh's heart, and he was not willing to let them go. Pharaoh said to Moses, "Get out of my sight. Make sure you do not appear before me again. The day you see my face, you will die." "Just as you say," Moses replied, "I will never appear before you again." And he doesn't. So here we go. He says, "I'm not coming back and asking for anything more." Now, they have more confrontation, but he says, "I'm not coming back. I'm not coming back and standing before you. I'm not giving you another option. I'm not going to come back and beg you again." And so Pharaoh says, "Don't, because you come back, you're going to die." He says, "Okay, have it your way." And so that is the end of the confrontation. Now, we're not going to get into the 10th plague, because next week we're going to talk about the 10th plague and the Passover. So that's coming up then. So, all right, questions? Right. Well, in that when all the livestock dies, and then a couple plagues later, you have livestock again. Well, time has passed, but the Israelites still had livestock. So I'm sure that the people who lost their livestock bought livestock from the Israelites, which would help them get a little bit more stuff. But they still had plenty of flocks and herds and everything up there. And they were people that were the shepherds and things like that, which Egyptians hated anyway. And so they would have probably been the main producer of livestock for that area. And I'm sure they just rebought and said, "Okay, we need more livestock." And they kind of plenished Egypt just so they could get wiped out in the next plague. But yeah, the Egyptians lost their livestock, but the Israelites still had all of theirs. And then once they became Egyptian property, then they were fair game.
This is kind of more of a point of clarification. I think we talked about this where people said, well, where it says God says, "I will harden Pharaoh's heart." People say, well, that takes away Pharaoh's free will. We talked about
Right.
that before. So you think it's more that, it's the things that I'm going to do. Pharaoh's heart's going to be hardened because he's going to be mad.
Yes. I think that definitely plays into it. Now, at the beginning, he tells Moses, "I'm going to harden his heart." And I think that there was a portion of that where he just said, "I'm not going to soften it." Because that language kind of goes both ways there. We take it very literally in English because it sometimes fits our arguments. But we have to look at the way that it's being written in the Hebrew and stuff here. But he's like, "I'm going to harden his heart," meaning I'm not going to soften it. I'm not going to make him open to your word or your message. I'm going to kind of close that door. But I do think as it went on, Pharaoh was getting very frustrated and angry. And I think that when it says that God is hardening his heart, his actions against Pharaoh were hardening Pharaoh's heart. The plagues that he was bringing on him was hardening Pharaoh's heart. The things that were happening to his officials and his magicians and all this kind of stuff, I think that all plays into that. And then it also intermixes back and forth between, Pharaoh hardened his own heart. He's like, "No, you ain't going." And so it kind of flops back and forth a little bit there. But yeah, I definitely think that God not just said, "I'm going to take away his free will so he can do this." Now, part of it is, again, God would not soften his heart because God says, "I'm doing this so you guys understand I'm who I say I am." And so even if Pharaoh says, "I'm going to tap out," God goes, "Oh, no, you're not. You're in this for the long haul, buddy. We're playing this one out." And so I think there is a certain portion of that where it's not so much taking away the free will as God is acting on the wickedness of Pharaoh's heart and saying, "Oh, no, you don't get to just, snap your fingers and say it's over. We're playing this one out." And so, absolutely. Yeah, because, we have free will, but God knows the decisions we're going to make. He doesn't make them for us, but he knows what we're going to choose. And so, yeah, I think that definitely plays into it. Any others? Oh, I think there's a certain element of that where God says, "Let me do this kind of a small thing," and the Egyptians go, "Oh, we can do that," and kind of lured him in a little bit to say, "Yeah, we can hang with this." And then all of a sudden he just turned it up another notch, and they're like, "Okay, we're done. We have nothing." But again, I think God was showing that he is superior to anything they had in magic, anything they had in gods, anything they had in religion, anything they had in their worship, and he just kept turning it up and making it more and more harsh on the different elements of their life until it became very personal to them. And that's when they started waving the white flag, but Pharaoh wouldn't hear of it. But yeah, I think at first it's almost like he's playing with them going, I know they can do this, so, or something similar. And so yeah, go out and do that. Moses, do a simpler one. And he did. And then the magicians, did their thing and thought, we can do this. But each time, again, the thing that you have to remember is whatever they were doing to mimic that plague, they couldn't stop it. Because nowhere does it say, God did this and their magicians made it go away. It was God did this and they were able to make something look like it or something similar to it, but they couldn't stop it. He still had to go back to Moses each time and say, would you pray to God and make this go away? So they, even in there, what they thought they could do, they had no control over the situation. They could just, huh? Oh yeah, I mean the scale of his plagues and stuff, but just the fact that, if you're really wanting to show that you can compete with somebody, it is way more effective to undo what somebody else has done rather than mimic what they've done. Because at the most, by mimicking what they've done, they're saying, see, I can do that too. But if somebody does something and you can take that away, now you've shown superiority to that. And the Egyptians could not do that. Their gods, of course, could not do that. Their magicians could not do that. Once God enacted a plague, they were stuck with it until Moses said, okay, I'll take it away. Which really showed, again, that God was in control of the situation and there was nothing they could do about it. No, we don't really have a time frame. Yeah, it was not 10 days. I mean, it was over a long period of time. I'm sure there's commentators that can, tell you about what they thought and stuff like that. But you're even seeing different seasons unfold, different times of crops and herds and things like that as you go through the plagues. It's not just something that happened in one season. It's something that took some time to develop. So. Well, we'll go ahead and